Good evening. I'm Tom Carson, President of the League of Women Voters of Glendale Burbank, and I would like to welcome you to this forum. As we begin our evening of democracy in action, let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The League of Women Voters was started in 1920 after women won the right to vote. For 40 years now, our organization has been open to both men and women. We are strong supporters of the election process, and the League joins the City of Burbank in encouraging voters to not only vote themselves, but to reach out to family members and friends to encourage them to vote as well. For the November ballot, the deadline for registering to vote or to changing your registration is Monday, October the 20th. The questions you will be hearing tonight are questions we have received from the public, and they have not been made available to any of the candidates before this forum. We hope the candidates will find the questions to be challenging, enabling you, the voters, to make an informed decision. Tonight's candidate forum rules call for adherence to the terms of civil discourse by both candidates and the public. The hallmark of democracy is the willingness of all members of our community to treat each other with courtesy and respect, not just the people that we agree with. It is in that spirit that we are here this evening to engage in a vital part of our democratic process, a civilized discussion of the important issues that confront our communities. So I want to thank all the candidates and the audience for being here tonight. The League also thanks the City of Burbank for once again providing voters with the opportunity to view this forum, both in person here tonight and via broadcast on the Burbank channel and streaming on the city's YouTube channel. We are particularly grateful for the assistance of the Burbank Public Information Office. We have many of our members here tonight working to make this forum happen. Included are our timekeepers, Bill Carson and Renee Leisk, our question sorters, Chris Carson and Elisa Homan, and audience greeters including Mickey Pierce, Lori Collins, Joan Goodell, and Ann Rundle. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening's forum, Rita Zwern. Rita is a longtime League member with much experience in moderating forums. We are grateful to Rita and the many hours that she dedicates to our League. Rita?
Thanks, Tom. Good evening. I'm Rita Zwern, and I will be the moderator for this evening's forum. This evening's forum will be recorded live and will be repeated at subsequent times on the Burbank channel and on the city's YouTube channel. No reproduction or rebroadcast of this forum may be made without the written permission of the League of Women Voters and the City of Burbank. The audience here tonight is invited to submit written questions for the candidates. Please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, and one of the monitors will provide you with a card and pencil. Questions will be collected only through the end of the second question. We would like to request that the audience turn off all smartphones, cell phones, and pagers, and that they refrain from applauding or otherwise disrupting the forum. If a candidate's supporters cause disruptions during another candidate's remarks, the second candidate will be given additional time to compensate for the interruption. The candidates here tonight are the only ones running for election in the 28th Congressional District. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement. Following this, I will ask questions submitted by the audience and the public. The first candidate on the die will have 3 minutes to respond to the first question. The second candidate will then have 2 minutes to respond to the same question. Then the second candidate on the dais will have 3 minutes to respond to the second question, followed by a 2-minute response by the first candidate on the dais, and so on. There will be 10 questions in all. Following the question period, the candidates will be given 2 minutes each for a closing statement. Our timekeepers will alert candidates to the time remaining with signs of 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then a stop sign when they are out of time. Attacks of a personal nature, including private matters having no bearing on a candidate's public persona or ability to perform the duties of the office in a competent, ethical manner, will not be tolerated. If a candidate makes a personal attack during the remarks, the time required for me to interrupt the candidate and remind him of the rule will be taken from his own speaking time. I would like to begin by introducing the candidates for the 28th Congressional District in alphabetical order. Representative Adam B. Schiff, Mr. Steve Stokes. We will now begin with opening statements. Mr. Schiff, your 2-minute opening statement, please.
Rita, thank you, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum tonight. The League does a marvelous job throughout the country, and it's a tremendous public service. I also want to thank the people of our community for the honor to represent them for several years now in Congress. And I want to ask for their support again. And I'd like to take a few moments this evening to talk about what I hope to accomplish in the next 2 years. First, I want to continue to work on strengthening the economy. We have seen a decrease in unemployment, which is very positive. It's now below 6%. But it's still too high in Los Angeles. It's over 8%. And we need to bring manufacturing back to this country. We need to invest in infrastructure and put people back to work in the construction industries. We need to help small businesses, and we need to invest in research and development. We also need to raise the minimum wage. We need to make sure that women get equal pay for equal work. These are all, I think, essential to an improved economy. I also want to continue to provide what I think is the best constituent service of any office in the state. And I say that only because my constituents tell me that almost every week. And I have a wonderful staff, second to none, that I want to thank for that. And finally, I want to continue to work in a bipartisan way to address some of the great challenges facing the United States. Challenges from terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, challenges like the global health crisis concerning Ebola, challenges from a resurgent and belligerent Russia, challenges from an increasingly competitive global economy. For the last several years, I've been very proud to work on these issues in a very bipartisan way, and I would ask once again for your support. I thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, your opening statement, please.
Good evening. My name is Steve Stokes. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to appear here, and thank Mr. Schiff as well for giving me the opportunity to discuss our important issues for our future with you. Mr. Carson as well, I appreciate the invitation so much to be here, and all of you for coming as well, and for caring about the future of our country, for caring about our political process, which is so important. It impacts every area of our life, all the important areas from medicine to our economy, education, jobs are all imported by politics. And so it is fantastic that everyone participates and is interested in the functioning of our political process. I'm running as an independent, and I'm running because I'm so concerned about the state of our nation. I never expected to be running for office. I'm a real estate and a mortgage broker. I've had a fantastic life. I've grown up here in Hollywood, and I'm a lifelong resident of California. But I am so concerned about the state of our nation, and that has compelled me to run, and I hope to discuss some of the very important issues that I feel will impact our future immediately and long term. And thank you so much for that opportunity.
Thank you. We will now begin the question period. The first question will be directed to Mr. Schiff first. The administration has proposed increasing the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10 an hour. Do you agree with this proposal? And please explain your answer. Mr. Schiff, your 3-minute response, please.
Thank you. I do support this measure. I support an increase in the minimum wage. It is, I think, one of the most effective measures that we can take to lift millions of families out of poverty. If you look at where the minimum wage is today around the country, we haven't seen a minimum wage in real dollar terms this low since probably the Eisenhower administration. So this is, I think, good economics. It not only helps those that will get an immediate raise, and millions of those families, But it also is a multiplier impact on the economy, because those families will have more disposable income, they can spend more, they can pay more into the economy, and that benefits all of us. So I think this is a very important ingredient. If you look at the increasing disparity in America between the very wealthy and the very poor, it is at a historic level. This is not only, I think, inequitable, but it also is poor economics. Economists will tell you, and I think with very good empirical evidence, that when that disparity becomes too great, it drags down overall economic growth. So it's, I think, good both in terms of the moral imperative, but it's also good, sound economics. So I strongly support that increase.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, your 2-minute response, please.
I also do support an increase in the minimum wage. I actually would consider a wage that over time should rise to at least $12 an hour for full-time regular employment. I do support what we have now, which is a current exception for part-time work, and not for part-time work, I'm sorry, but for temporary work. That way students who are just learning and training period can be paid at what I would feel would be the current minimum wage of $7.35 an hour, with the increase for the minimum wage to $10.10 immediately, and following over the next couple of years up to $12, which I really do feel will provide a stimulus for those who are entering the job force and who are looking to advance their lives. I don't feel that the minimum wage is something that most folks can make a living on at this point, and so it's something that needs to be raised, but I don't feel that we should focus so much on the minimum wage, because I feel that people need, the minimum wage is not a living wage for our society, and we really do need to focus more on education and training and making sure that folks who are at that minimum wage level will advance and be able to progress in their life and achieve our American dream. And so that is my that is where I feel that we should act on as far as the minimum wage.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Stokes. What should our short-term and long-term goals be in the Middle East? Mr. Stokes, your 3-minute response, please.
Certainly. The Middle East has been a complex situation for as long as I have been alive. There are so many different players. It's been a constant source of strife over decades, and I'm sure even longer than that. And of course, ever since the attacks of 9/11, there have been increased concern over terrorism, and we of course have to keep our country safe, and everything that relates to the Middle East has been construed in those terms. Whereas what we do need to do is to absolutely make certain that our country is secure and safe, and it's fantastic that we have been able to keep our country safe in these years following 9/11. We do have to make sure that an attack like that will never, ever happen again. But in that time since the 9/11 attack, we have had so many actions by our government that actually, in concern for the effects of terrorism, but those effects are actually having an impact on the fundamental core values of our American society and the functioning of our legal process. And so I feel that we do need to be very vigilant as far as the process, but I actually do feel that we need to use every available peaceful measure to resolve our overseas conflicts. We need to the greatest degree possible, not be interventionist, and to impose our dominance on other areas of the world. All we need to do is to keep our country safe. And so, in the short term, I would support every available negotiated option in order to rein in the current crisis, which is ongoing. I do feel that that so many of the everything is played for the media, and so much of the response is a little bit. Everyone is very polarizing, and I feel that we need to be very careful before we act in this situation.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 2-minute response, please.
Thank you. In the near term, I think our priority has to be on degrading and defeating ISIS. This is an unprecedented threat. It is essentially a terrorist army that holds about a third of Syria and about a third of Iraq. It is beheading people. It is raping women. It is sending women into sexual slavery. It is committing incredible mass atrocities. And it is an assault on civilization itself. I think on the positive side, we have built a very large international coalition with the objective of degrading and defeating ISIS. And in the near term, I think that's where our focus has to be. If ISIS is allowed to hold ground and hold territory, it will be a sanctuary for attacks on the United States. There it is, one of their stated objectives. And one of those strikes that have taken place so far, one of the first strikes in Syria was against a group called the Khorasan Group, which is a group of former or current al-Qaeda members of a group called al-Nusra, the official al-Qaeda franchise in Syria. And they are bent on attacking the West, trying to bring down our aircraft, among other plots. So this has to be a real near-term priority. Over the long term, as the President outlined in his speech at the United Nations, we have to work with our partners around the world, and particularly those in the Islamic world, to confront this virulent strain within Islam, this perversion of Islam that believes it is okay to attack and murder those who don't worship the same God or don't worship the same God in the same way. And until that is confronted, we will always be plagued with the likes of al-Qaeda and ISIS. We also, I think, have to return to the objective of trying to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. I'm a strong believer in a two-state solution with a safe and secure Israel and a safe and secure Palestinian state. And while that right now has certainly taken a back seat to the imperative of stopping ISIS, that has to remain a priority for the United States and one that I would work on.
The next question will be directed first to Mr. Schiff. Student loan debt rose 20% to $1.2 trillion between 2011 and 2013, which has a serious impact on the larger economy and particularly the housing market. What should the federal government do to address this situation? Mr. Schiff, your 3-minute response, please.
Well, Rita, this is a crushing problem, and it may be the next big financial crisis in the country. It's certainly one that I can relate to very personally. When I went to college and graduate school, I had the misfortune of going at a time when student loan interest was 9%, 12%, and 14%. It took me a decade to pay off my student loans, and for that decade, my loan payments were greater than my rent. So I can well appreciate the situation of many students today who have graduated with crushing debt. It not only gives them a first mortgage before they own a home, but it also can pose real limitations on what kind of fields they can go into by putting real constraints on jobs that they might want to take but can't afford to take. So this is a national crisis, and one of the bills that I'm supporting is a bill that would allow the renegotiation of student loan debt, much in the same way you refinance a house when rates come down. Students that borrow when rates are higher should be allowed to renegotiate and refinance those student loans. That could save potentially billions of dollars in interest payments for students around the country. We also need to work to make sure that our universities take action to keep fees and costs down. Otherwise, increasing financial assistance at the federal level merely is a cost shift from the state governments to the federal government. So we have to work on this from a number of levels. We have to make sure that our universities, both private and public, are looking at ways to constrain those costs, that a lot of our private universities that have very large endowments consider using those endowments to keep the cost of tuition down rather than simply building new buildings or building up a nice portfolio. So it's going to have to be an across-the-board solution. I also support legislation that would allow the government that is currently allow the government to acquire some of this student debt, which will result in cost savings by taking out some of the middlemen, some of the banks that have profited considerably from these student loans and allow us to reinvest that money both in lower interest rates for students as well as greater availability of Pell Grants and other financial aid. I've been a strong supporter of keeping the Pell Grant program not only alive but well, and increasing the size of Pell Grants and making sure that we have Perkins loans and Stafford loans and other means by which we can keep the doors to higher education open. One of the keys to upward mobility in the United States has always been access to higher ed, but to the degree it's becoming priced out of the market, we're doing a real disservice to the future, our future generation, as well as our economy as a whole.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, of course, education is a key point in so many parts of our life. It's the economy is dependent upon a vibrant workforce. Every individual deserves the opportunity to live the American dream, and without a higher level education, that becomes extremely difficult. So I actually have a proposal to start a free online advanced degree program, where the program will be it will be free, as many of our programs were here in California, the Cal State system, about 30 years or so ago, which I didn't have an opportunity to take advantage of. As far as student debt now, as a real estate broker, I deal with buyers all the time, young folks who are completely unable to buy, or who we meet extreme challenges with being able to have them acquire a home based on their student debt. And so I feel that at this point, I've heard the government is actually earning a reward on student interest. The interest is so high that even from the Department of Education, it's a profit center for the government. So I feel that that's not right. I do support acquisition of all debt by the Department of Education, and reducing the interest rate to a level which is just enough to carry the debt without profiting on that from our students. I really do feel that they need that opportunity to get education and to not be burdened by debt, so that they can get a great start in their life.
Thank you. The next question will be directed to Mr. Stokes. Women have a growing and vital role in our military services, but the sexual harassment of women in the military has not yet been adequately addressed. What can Congress do to achieve significant improvement in this situation? Mr. Stokes, your 3-minute response, please.
Well, it's fantastic that women have been serving in the military. Don't ask, don't tell is a fantastic policy. Our military is another fantastic way for our citizens to give back and to serve and to develop the skills that they need to move forward in their life. And women need to be encouraged to participate in that to the highest degree. So it's so unfortunate that in a male-dominated culture, women are, in certain times, put in positions where they they feel that they are being preyed upon, and so in order to address the situation, I really feel that the key is education and certainly discipline also. So I do feel that in every case we need to have whistleblower laws where any misconduct is readily investigated, and where it is actually a safe and secure place for women to serve in the military.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 2-minute response, please.
One of the most inspiring parts of my job is I've had the chance to visit our troops around the world, in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. They are the most extraordinary, mostly young people I've ever met, and many of them are women, an increasing number are women. They serve with great distinction and great courage in every capacity in the military, and it's a tribute to the country, and it's a tribute to their capabilities that they serve so effectively. It is an appalling blemish on the United States that we have such a prevalence of sexual assault within the military. We've had tremendous problems even in our elite service academies, and no branch of the service has been immune. This requires us to take, I think, very strong action. One of my colleagues in the Senate, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, has proposed legislation that I strongly support that would take the handling of sexual assault cases out of the chain of command, so that independent eyes would have oversight of these allegations of sexual misconduct. I think that's vitally important. Now, this is being resisted by the military because forever these problems have been handled within the chain of command. But there's often a conflict of interest within the chain of command that wishes to suppress potentially any problems, any blemishes within that command. And this is why I think it is so important that these decisions be made by an independent review or an independent military officer. So I find myself in strong agreement with my colleague, Senator Gillibrand, and disagreement thus far with the military. If this were a small problem, if this were an occasional problem, that might be one thing. But regrettably, this has been a widespread problem, and I think we need to approach it in a completely new way. And that's why I think one of the most effective things we can do is change the nature of the tribunals that hear this, change the, take these decisions out of the chain of command.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Schiff. What do you think is the proper role of corporations in American elections? Mr. Schiff, your 3-minute response, please.
Well, this is a very important question because one of the great concerns I have over the nature of our democracy is the way that campaign finance has been perverted. I think this has been in significant part a result of some Supreme Court decisions that have decided that corporations are the equivalent of people for the purposes of the First Amendment. Many people point to Citizens United as the cornerstone of that decision, but the problem goes back further than that. It goes back to a decision called Buckley versus Vallejo that struck down part of a post-Watergate reform. After Watergate, Congress passed laws that did two things. They limited the amount that could be directly contributed to a candidate, and they limited the amount that could be independently spent on behalf of that candidate. Well, half of that Watergate law was struck down by the Supreme Court in the Buckley decision. It said that a direct contribution to a candidate might corrupt that candidate, and that could be limited without violating the Constitution. But an independent expenditure couldn't possibly corrupt that elected official, and therefore it was unconstitutional to try to limit that expenditure. What we have seen, in effect, is that there's little or no difference between the two types of campaign expenditures. In the presidential campaign that we just went through, for example, one person, a casino magnate, was able to almost single-handedly fund Newt Gingrich's campaign through an independent expenditure. Now, this magnate was limited in only providing $5,000 in a direct contribution to Newt Gingrich, but he could spend $20 million in a so-called independent expenditure. Well, there are only 5 people in the country that think that is less corrupting than the direct contribution. Unfortunately, those 5 sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. I've introduced a constitutional amendment that would overturn that part of Buckley versus Vallejo that would once again allow Congress to regulate not only direct contributions to candidates, but also these independent expenditures by corporations. Corporations have a vital role to play in our economy. They are an essential part of America. But they are not the equivalent of individuals, not for the First Amendment purposes, not, I might add, for the purposes of free exercise of religion, which is another Supreme Court decision that I think is an error. So I would strongly support efforts not only to overturn that line of reasoning by the Supreme Court, but also, short of a constitutional amendment, we can do a lot by requiring disclosure of corporate contributions, which is why I've been a sponsor of the Disclose Act that would require transparency so we would know who is giving, because part of the result of these Supreme Court decisions has been to allow anonymous contributions, and that is even a greater danger to the health of our democracy.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, your 2-minute response, please.
Certainly, the contributions by corporations are impacting our democracy. I don't think the framers of our Constitution ever had the intention of granting the rights under the Constitution or the Bill of Rights to corporations. These rights are given by God. They're inalienable rights granted to human beings. And a corporation is a legal construct which is fantastic for business purposes, but a corporation is not entitled to the same protections in regards to representation in our democracy. One of the key points of campaign finance is we don't allow foreign individuals to contribute to our democracy, and most of the corporations are in part foreign owned, and so the concept that we would allow corporate multinational corporations to contribute to our democracy is actually corrupting not only on the speech of our citizens, but also on the integrity of American control of our country. So I also agree, of course, that Citizens United needs to be overturned. We do need to pass an amendment, but we need to do a whole lot more than that. We need to have campaign finance reform, and disclosure alone is not adequate. When wealthy individuals can contribute extreme amounts of money through PACs and being able to purchase elections, that disadvantages other citizens. And I do believe that our system should work on one person, one vote, and that campaigning should be an exercise in ideas that benefit our democracy rather than a way to purchase influence in our government.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Stokes. Please explain why you do or do not support the Environmental Protection Agency's efforts to enforce strong clean air and clean water standards in America. Mr. Stokes, your 3-minute response, please.
Thank you. Well, I definitely do support EPA's efforts to clean our air here. I lived here in Los Angeles in the 1970s, where we had daily, all summer long, we had daily smog alerts. It was impossible to see the San Gabriel Mountains. It was extremely challenging. Our kids were feeling sick on the playgrounds. So I can see the fact that we have strong restrictions in place, strong emission standards have impacted our country, especially here in California. It's what we need. We have to continue to fight to reduce emissions, and to the degree that the EPA can be involved in that's a great effort. I think we need to explore other options as well. There's a lot of proposals. Of course, we have cap and trade for limiting carbon emissions, but beyond that, would encourage viewing a proposal which is a fee and dividend proposal to allow our producers to trade their emissions in order to reduce our emissions here in California. We've done very well. The air is so much cleaner now, but yeah, we do need to continually be vigilant about our climate.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 2-minute response, please.
I strongly support the protections of the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and their vigorous enforcement. And interestingly enough, this question and the last are interrelated. Not a week goes by in Congress these days where we don't have a vote to eviscerate either the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act. And in fact, these special interests bill are bought and paid for by these corporate interests that lobby for sweetheart deals that will erode the protections of that vital legislation to benefit one industry or another. Those efforts are tremendously misguided. We don't have to choose, in my view, between having a healthy economy and having a clean environment. We must have both. And I think both of these acts and their enforcement have been vital components of not only a clean environment but a strong economy as well. If we look around the world, do we really want to go down the path, for example, that China's going down, where many days of the week you can't breathe the air without coughing, without getting respiratory illness? That's not, I think, where the United States wants to lead. I will also say that on one of the clean water issues, this is an issue that I've led on for many years now, and that is chromium, hexavalent chromium in our water. I was the first to introduce legislation to study the potential carcinogenic effects of chromium in the water. When that was later confirmed, I was the first to help fund new treatment technologies to remove that from our water. This is a grave concern for many of the residents of our community. Those efforts now are very much ongoing, and we have lower concentrations of hexavalent chromium in the water because of that. California recently announced a new standard, a more protective standard against hexavalent chromium, which was also the product of many of my efforts over the years. So this is, I think, of vital importance to our community, and it's an area that I've been proud to work on a great deal.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Schiff. What do you propose to do? What do you propose to do to attract and keep companies in California without loss of tax funds for important programs? Mr. Schiff, your 3-minute response, please.
In my experience, what business people are looking for more than anything else is they want to know what the playing field is going to be. They want to know if they want to site a new manufacturing plant in California that they can get the permits to do so within a reasonable period of time. They want to know what the rules of the game are going to be. They want to know what regulatory structure they're going to face, what their tax burden will be. They want certainty. What they tell me is that we will adapt to whatever the environment is as long as we can see beyond next year. We need some stability. So one of the things that I think is vitally important that I've worked on is to try to provide that certainty and stability, to try to simplify our regulatory structure so that corporations know what they'll be asked to do, so that we can eliminate unnecessary regulations that are an impediment, so that we can get to yes or get to no sometimes in terms of corporate decision making, so that companies know, okay, this is what we can do, this is what we cannot do. It is, I think, essential to be able to compete. It's also essential that we have a competitive tax structure. One of the efforts that I've worked on since my days in the state legislature, for example, is keeping the vital entertainment industry here in our community that provides so many good jobs. It's one of the reasons why I led the effort in Congress to support the state legislation to provide a tax credit to keep that industry here, to be competitive not only with other states but with other countries as well. It's why I'm a co-chair of the Anti-Piracy Caucus, so that we can strengthen laws that protect the intellectual property that's created here by so many of our brilliant and creative minds. So these are some of the steps we must take. A certain playing field, a regulatory reform, a tax structure that incentivizes businesses to come to California, to stay in California, efforts to compete more fairly, not only with other states, but with other countries as well. These, I think, are essential ingredients. We don't want to get in a race to the bottom with other states. And that is by reducing the kind of social services, by reducing the education that we can provide our people, by basically preventing the government from funding essential services. That's not the direction we want to go in. But with these other steps, I think we can attract good business and still provide the same quality of education and social service that Californians have become used to.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, this comes down to budget management. I feel that in managing the budgets, we so often propose to have, $30 or $40 billion to solve our education problem, or, $130 billion for this military project or whatnot. And this is fantastic. If we have issues, we have problems that we need to solve. We need to maintain our safety net. Social Security, Medicare, all these things are things that need to be maintained and maintained for the indefinitely. And so the fact is, our budgets are something that is not, we haven't balanced a budget in at least the last 14 years. And so what we need to do is really not so much appropriate money to solve our issues, but really manage the delivery of services, and to make sure that our budgets are well managed and that the funds are used for the intended purposes. If we can rein in that the wasteful spending of government, I really feel that we can then reduce our taxes, which is what we need to do to keep businesses here in California. And I think that's it. Of course, our movie industry. I grew up with the movie industry here in LA. We've had runaway production for many, many years now. These people are begging for us to keep them here, and other states are competing, and we're losing business. And so we need to manage our budgets so that we can reduce our tax rates. I don't think that's synonymous with cutting services, and I think that just requires better management of our budget.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Stokes. What is your opinion on the alternative minimum tax? Mr. Stokes, your 3-minute response, please.
I can be short here. The alternative, we have such a complicated tax code. It's something that, as you're a business person working to build a business, you know, every new enterprise or every new area that you enter requires a whole new, not only endeavor to set up the operation, but a review of the tax code. It's just completely unfathomable how the tax code got how complex it is now. That being said, we have a system in place. It's the alternative minimum tax is a tax that seeks to recoup expenses from individuals who have passive income, and so higher net worth individuals. I really think we need to keep to repeal the alternative minimum tax, but I think that needs to be part of a complete overhaul of our tax system.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 2-minute response, please.
The alternative minimum tax, I think, began with a laudable objective, and that was that there were, I think, literally a handful of families in the country that, because they could take advantage of certain tax loopholes, even though they were fabulously wealthy, they paid no taxes. And so this alternative minimum tax was created to capture some income to make sure that everyone paid a fair share, or at least some share. Over time, though, the AMT wasn't indexed for inflation, and it went from a handful of families, applying to a handful of families, to applying to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, then millions of families. And for that reason, for many years now, I have supported reforming the AMT to make sure that we raise the threshold income where the AMT would apply, so that we protect middle-income families, so that it doesn't apply without continual reform over the years. We have taken some of those steps. They have all been temporary patchwork. I favor a permanent solution to the AMT, where the AMT would only apply to very high-income families, where it would be indexed for inflation, so that we don't have this problem where it keeps creeping down and taking into its grasp middle-income families. I do think the AMT is part of a broader issue, though, and that is something that Warren Buffett, I think, has spoken about very eloquently. And that is, with or without the AMT, we still have a situation where there are a great many very, very wealthy families, some who earn billions in the kind of passive income that Mr. Stokes talked about, who pay very little tax. And in fact, Mr. Buffett was surprised to learn that of all the people in his employ, he paid the lowest effective tax rate. I think, to his credit, he said that he did not believe that was fair, and I think he's right. I think we have to take steps to continue to ensure that our tax code is a progressive tax code, and we're not placing the principal burden of taxes on working families and middle-income families.
The next question will be directed first to Mr. Schiff. Would you support public funding of elections? Please explain. Your 3-minute response, please.
Part of the problem in the Supreme Court decisions that I was talking about earlier with Citizens United and Buckley versus Vallejo, we've also had Supreme Court decisions recently that have struck down state laws that have tried to provide for public financing, that have tried to allow for public financing with, for example, millionaire provisions, where people stepped in and spent tremendous amounts of their own money. It allowed public financing of candidates that didn't have that wherewithal. I think states should be free to enact public financing models if that's what they choose to do. Part of the constitutional amendment that I introduced to overturn Citizens United also overturns this line of Supreme Court reasoning. It empowers states to develop public financing schemes if that is what they choose to do. I think that ought to be left to each state to decide. So yes, I favor allowing states the ability to undertake public financing. The amendment that I drafted I worked on actually with one of my old law professors, Professor Larry Tribe, one of the preeminent constitutional scholars in the country, and it would address those twin problems of the Supreme Court decisions, that of unbridled, often anonymous, vast corporate expenditures, and the inability of states now, because of the Supreme Court, to enact public financing of campaigns.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, your 2-minute response, please.
As far as public financing for elections, again, it is financing and campaign finance reform. I do feel that having a patchwork of regulations, state by state, where public financing is completely up to the state's discretion and is a widely varying thing, is not necessarily the solution for improving our representation, which is the whole purpose of having elections and having a representative democracy. And so I feel that it's much stronger to actually eliminate corporate donations. So corporations, again, are not people and shouldn't be financing our elections. Individuals should finance our elections, and they should be financed with strict limits, as we do have now from individual candidates. I think here with our new, with social media and with our newly connected world, it really does not need to be, we don't need extreme amounts of money to get our message out, and the extra money is actually used as a means of crushing individual voices. And so new and outsider candidates who are unable to raise the type of money that Mr. Schiff has raised, of course, their viewpoints are no less valid, but their viewpoints are much are silenced. And so I don't feel that public financing is a solution to that, but just limiting corporate contributions.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Stokes. What is the maximum time one person should hold a seat in Congress? Do you support term limits for Congress? Mr. Stokes, your 3-minute response, please.
Shortly, I do support term limits. I feel that the longer an individual is in office, the more certainly the more disconnected they become from the problems and the lives of normal citizens. Not only that, as we just spoke of, it becomes a situation where the incumbents are courted by our corporations for the ability to deliver legislation, which benefits those special interests. And so, the longer an incumbent is in office, the more so those connections are confirmed. And so, I do feel that we need to have term limits. We have term limits here in California, and I think that we need to have term limits at the federal level as well.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff, your 2-minute response, please.
I don't support them, and if you look at the experience, unfortunately, we've had in California, I think you have to say that the result has been very mixed. Instead of doing what they were intended to do, which is get the representative to focus on the work that they have, knowing that they would have a limited time in office, in fact, what it has accomplished is largely getting the representative to think about what their next elected position is going to be. So, as we have all seen, we have state legislators moving to the city council, moving from the city council to the board of supervisors, moving from the board of supervisors back to the legislature. I don't think that has resulted in good governance. In the Congress, in fact, we've had tremendous turnover. If you look at the last 2 to 4 years, probably almost a third to a half of the Congress has changed. And you have to ask yourself, has that improved the governance in the Congress? Unfortunately, I think over the last several years, the governance in Congress has gotten nothing but worse. Part of that is we have a whole influx of people who aren't interested in governing, have no experience in governing. They're only interested in tearing down. And that, I think, has resulted in a lot of the dysfunction that we see. Historically, people have run against Congress. So they've run against the institution. It's a very popular, tried and true, probably goes back to the days of the Founding Fathers. But we have seen, unfortunately, over the last several years, that people who have run on that platform, who have traditionally understood that when they're elected they had a responsibility to govern, have never made that transition. And I think that's part of the dysfunction that we're seeing. So I don't think that's the answer. I do think that part of the answer we are seeing in California, and that is redistricting reform. We have taken redistricting out of the hands of the elected officials, out of the hands of the legislature. I would like to see that done on a national level, national redistricting reform, which I have co-sponsored and support. I think that is a far more important reform than making sure that the Congress is largely made up of people that lack experience. That inexperience can be helpful, but it can be a problem as well.
We will now conclude with a 2-minute closing statement from each candidate. Mr. Schiff, your closing statement, please.
Well, I want to again thank you for hosting the forum tonight, and I want to thank my colleague for joining me. It's been a pleasure to exchange views. There is a certain sorority and fraternity among those who run for office, and I have great respect for anyone willing to put their name on the ballot. So it's been a pleasure. Once again, I guess want to conclude where I began, which is it's been a tremendous honor to serve the community, and I would ask for your vote and the chance to continue to serve you. We face an extraordinary number of challenges, and one of the things I'm very proud of is that I have worked ever since my first days in office in a very bipartisan way to try to tackle these challenges with the economy, with our environment. In fact, today I was proud to join the President out in San Gabriel with the designation of the new national monument to protect the open space in this region. This is something I've worked on for over a decade now, and it was a great pleasure to see the product of that bipartisan work. Legislation I introduced many years ago on a very bipartisan basis, signed by President Bush, has resulted also in a study that's ongoing right now to expand the rim of the valley as part of a new national recreation area. I'm very proud that most of the legislation I introduced has a Republican co-sponsor. I went to Washington to serve the community and to solve problems. That's what I want to continue to do. There are a great many people, as Mr. Stokes makes mention of, who are part of the problem in Washington. There are a great many people who have spent too long there. There are some new members of Congress that are also part of the problem. I went there to be part of the solution, and that's what I want to continue to do, and I ask for your support.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, your closing statement, please.
Well, thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for allowing us this opportunity to discuss our important issues. I feel that the issue of term limits, what the fact is that those in Congress are running every 2 years. The folks in Congress shouldn't be running based on needing to make any statements other than their works while they're in office, and so that should be the resume that guarantees re-election. And there are a lot of new congresspersons in office who I feel are doing a great job. And when I started running, I was very concerned about Congress as a whole, but I've realized through my research that a lot of great congresspersons, Alan Grayson being one of them, Thomas Massey, there's on both sides of the aisle, there's great people who are doing fantastic work. But I do feel that we need to look at the records of our Congress, of our elected officials very carefully. This is a democracy. It's a representative government. We need folks to be involved and to be able to in order to reach individuals and to be able to resolve our issues, our important issues in Congress. And it's a great opportunity to be able to talk about these issues. I would encourage everyone to look at the records of all of our representatives before casting a ballot. And as a challenger, of course, I don't have a record, but I do have a lifetime of achievements, and I do feel that the whole point of our democracy is that we all should have an opportunity to serve, and at the end of our service to return to a private life. So we shouldn't continue to chase one office to another. That Americans should serve, especially in the House of Representatives. It's the people's house. It should be an opportunity for many individuals to serve.
Thank you. That concludes our candidates forum. Our thanks to the candidates and volunteers for your participation in this evening's forum. We're also grateful to Drew Sugars, the Burbank Public Information Officer, and the staff of the Burbank Channel, Walter Lutz and Carol Dorman, for their valuable support in making this event possible. Finally, the League of Women Voters of Glendale Burbank would like to thank both our audience in attendance and those of you at home. Please be sure to vote, whether in person or by mail, so that your ballot is received by November 4th. And remember, on Election Day, it's the votes, not the polls, that count. Thank you, and good night.